I used to think God was ignoring me. I am Margaret. I'm 89 years old, and for most of my life I believed my prayers were falling into an empty sky. It has taken me nearly a century to understand that silence can be an answer too. When I was a little girl, I believed faith worked like a trade. You ask kindly, you behave properly, and heaven responds. My mother taught me to kneel beside my bed every night, hands folded, eyes closed tight, as if squeezing them harder would make God listen more carefully. I prayed for small things back then. I prayed for my father to come home safe from the factory. I prayed for good weather on Sundays. I prayed for my freckles to fade before school pictures. Sometimes those prayers seemed to work, and I built a simple theory about the world. Good requests, good results. That theory did not survive my 20s. I fell in love at 19 with a man named Thomas. He had steady hands and a laugh that filled a room without asking permission. We married young, as people did in those days, and we believed love was protection enough against whatever life might bring. When I became pregnant with our first child, I prayed every single night for a healthy baby. I promised God I would be grateful forever if only everything went smoothly. The baby did not live past 3 days. There is a particular kind of silence that sits in a hospital room after hope has left it. I remember standing by that tiny crib and feeling something inside me tear, not just my heart but my understanding of how the world worked. I had done everything right. I had prayed harder than I had ever prayed before. I had bargained and pleaded, and still I went home with empty arms. For months I continued to pray, but my words had changed. They were not gentle anymore. I asked why. I asked what I had done wrong. I asked what kind of lesson required that kind of pain. The silence that followed felt cruel. I told myself that if God would not answer me, I would learn not to expect anything at all. Life, however, does not pause while you sort out your theology. Thomas and I had 2 more children, both healthy. I loved them fiercely, almost fearfully, as if loving them too loudly might attract loss again. Every fever sent me into a quiet panic. Every late arrival from school felt like a threat. I prayed constantly, but my prayers were anxious, protective, almost suspicious. I was not speaking to a loving presence anymore. I was negotiating with a power I did not fully trust. In my 40s, Thomas was diagnosed with an illness that moved quickly and without mercy. I returned to the bargaining table. I promised again. I told God I would accept any hardship, any sacrifice, if only my husband could stay. I sat beside his hospital bed and whispered prayers into folded sheets. When he died, I felt as though I had been refused twice. That was the period of my life when I nearly walked away from faith entirely. I still went to church because routine is a powerful thing, but I stopped expecting comfort. People would say, "It's all part of a plan," and I would nod politely while something inside me hardened. A plan that required this much breaking did not seem like a plan I wanted to praise. I raised my children alone. I worked longer hours than I thought my body could handle. I missed school plays and parent meetings because bills do not wait for grief. There were nights when I fell into bed so tired that I could not form a proper prayer, and I told myself it did not matter anyway. But something quiet was happening beneath my disappointment. When my daughter turned 16, she came to me one evening in tears. A boy had broken her heart, and she asked me how to survive pain that felt unbearable. I wanted to protect her from it. I wanted to pray it away. Instead, I found myself telling her the truth, that some pain does not disappear, but it changes shape, and that surviving it can make you gentler with other people's wounds. I realized as I spoke that I had become someone who understood suffering in a way I never had before. Women in my neighborhood began knocking on my door when their own losses came. I did not have solutions for them. I did not offer grand explanations. I made tea. I listened. I sat with them in the same kind of silence I once resented. Years passed. My children grew up. They married, moved away, built lives of their own. I watched them make choices I would not have made, and I prayed again, this time not for control, but for their resilience. Sometimes things worked out, sometimes they did not. I began to notice that the prayers that seemed unanswered were often the ones that pushed us towards something unexpected. My son once lost a job he believed was his future. He was devastated. He had a family to support, and I could see the shame in his eyes. I prayed desperately for that position to be restored. It never was. Instead, he took temporary work in a different field, met a business partner there, and years later built a company that allowed him to be home for dinner every night. He told me once, losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to me. I remembered how furious I had been at heaven on his behalf. As I entered my 70s, my own health began to falter. I developed a heart condition that required surgery. Lying in that hospital bed, I felt a strange calm. I had spent decades wrestling with God, accusing and defending in equal measure. This time my prayer was simple: whatever comes, help me face it honestly. The surgery was successful, but recovery was long. During those months, I depended on others in a way that humbled me. My daughter moved into my house temporarily. She cooked for me, helped me dress, sat beside me in the evenings. One night she said, "Mum, I never realized how strong you were until I saw how you handle this." I almost laughed. Strength had never felt like strength while I was living it. It felt like survival. It was during that recovery that the pattern began to reveal itself. I thought back to the baby I lost and the women I later comforted in their own hospital rooms. I thought about Thomas and how loving him, even briefly, taught me a depth of commitment that shaped every relationship afterward. I thought about my son's lost job, my daughter's broken heart, my own fragile heart. None of those events were what I asked for. None of them felt fair, but each one carved out space inside me that did not exist before. I am not saying that tragedy is a gift. I would never tell a grieving mother that her pain is a blessing in disguise. What I am saying is that the absence of the answer I wanted often led me toward an answer I could not have imagined. When I was young, I believed God's role was to arrange my circumstances according to my requests. At 89, I see faith differently. I no longer view prayer as a transaction. It is a relationship that unfolds over time, and time is the one thing we rarely allow when we demand answers. I used to think unanswered prayers meant abandonment. Now I wonder if they were invitations. Invitations to grow in directions I would not have chosen on my own. Invitations to loosen my grip on outcomes. Invitations to become someone capable of holding other people's sorrow without trying to fix it. There were years when I thought heaven was silent. Looking back, I see that life itself was speaking. It was shaping me through experiences I did not request, but desperately needed. The younger version of me wanted protection from all pain. The older woman I am today understands that a life entirely free of heartbreak would also be free of certain kinds of compassion. If I could sit beside my younger self in that hospital room with the empty crib, I would not offer explanations. I would not promise that everything happens for a tidy reason. I would simply tell her that this loss will not be the end of her story, and that one day she will sit with other mothers and know exactly what to say, because she has walked that road herself. I still pray. I pray for my grandchildren, for their safety, for their wisdom. I am sure some of those prayers will not be answered the way I hope. I no longer interpret that as rejection. I see it as part of a conversation that stretches far beyond a single moment. At 89, I do not claim to understand the full design of anything. I have simply lived long enough to see that what once looked like denial sometimes revealed itself as direction. The path I resisted most fiercely often led me to the people and purposes that defined my life. If you are waiting on an answer that has not come, I will not tell you to be patient as if patience were easy. I will only say that meaning sometimes moves slowly, and perspective is a privilege of time. The silence you are experiencing today may look different when viewed from decades ahead. I spent half my life asking why God did not answer me. The second half has been spent noticing how those very silences shaped who I became. And if there is any wisdom I can offer from this long imperfect life, it is this: an unanswered prayer is not always the absence of care. Sometimes it is the beginning of a deeper understanding, one that only years can teach.